Okay, this is Unit 12, Lesson 6. We're factoring using the distributive property. And your objective is there, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, one thing we got to start looking for is factoring out greatest common factors. We kind of did that in the last lesson, but now we need to make sure that we are not forgetting about the variables. Okay, so if I want to factor out the GCF of 14x to the fourth plus negative 21x squared, okay, I need to factor out the greatest common factor of the numbers. So the greatest common factor of 14 and negative 21 is going to be 7. And it's going to be positive because the leading coefficient is positive. But then I need to factor out the greatest common factor of the variables too. So the greatest common factor of x to the fourth and x squared is x squared. Okay? And then 7x squared times what equals 14x to the fourth? Well, 7 times 2 is 14, and x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. Sorry about the train noise, by the way. Guess you'll have to deal with it. Then 7 times negative 3 is negative 21, and x squared times 1 gives me x squared, so we don't need to account for that. So this is how we would factor out the greatest common factor here. Take into account the variables this time. Okay? So that's something that we need to start paying attention to in this lesson. So let's go ahead and do some more examples. These examples say to tell if the polynomial is factored completely. And it says to use the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Okay, assuming it's a quadratic. So they took this right here and factored out the greatest common factor. So that's where this is. Okay? So we want to know, is this part, x squared plus 4, factored completely or not? Okay, well, you'll see we got an a and a c, but no b. So we need to write this in standard form first. So this is x squared plus I have no x's plus 4. So now I want to use the discriminant to tell if it's factored completely. So b squared, that's 0 squared, minus 4 times a times c. So it's 0 minus 4 times 1 times 4 is 16, and that's negative 16. Okay? Well, negative 16 is not a number we can find the square root of, so the answer is yes, it is factored completely. Okay? So yes, it is factored. Next one, 2x squared minus 8. Whoops. And again, we've pulled out the greatest common factor already. So we want to know, is this part, x squared minus 4, factored completely or not? So again, we can go x squared plus 0x plus negative 4 to put it in standard form. Okay, then we need to do b squared minus 4ac. So that's 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. Okay, so it's 0 minus 4 times 1 times negative 4 is negative 16, and 0 minus negative 16 is 16. That's a perfect square, so we know that we can factor this yet. Okay, so it is not factored completely. Okay, now if that's the only question that the book asks, is if it's factored completely or not, then this is all we need for our answer. If the instruction said, if it's not completely factored, then factor it, then we would want to go ahead and factor this out, okay, to completely factor this right here. Alright, but we're not going to do that for this example. Let's go ahead and keep moving on. Okay, this example says to solve by factoring, and we've got our steps right here. So the first thing we need to do is take out a greatest common factor if it is possible. Well, I'm looking here. Okay, I know that 4 and 20 and 24 have a greatest common factor, and then x cubed, x squared, and x also have a common factor. So the greatest common factor of 4 and 20 and 24 is 4, and the greatest common factor of x cubed, x squared, and x is just x. So I'm going to factor out a 4x. Well, 4x times x squared gives me 4x cubed, plus 4x times 5x would give me 20x squared, plus 4x times 6 would give me 24x. Okay? Now we need to go ahead and factor this trinomial if we can. And I'm going to go ahead and be able to factor this trinomial. Okay, a times c is 6, And factors of 6 that add up to 5 are positive 2 and positive 3. So we're going to have x squared. I'm actually going to go ahead and use the grouping method on this one, okay? Plus 2x plus 3x plus 6, okay? The reason I'm going to use the grouping method is because in this lesson we're going to use this one later, okay? And it's going to be the only method that we're going to be able to use. We're not going to be able to use the box method. So now we're reintroducing the grouping method here. So we took our x squared, okay, wrote it down. Our factors of 6 that add up to 5x are 2x and 3x, so we wrote those out. Now we need to group these. So it's x squared plus 2x goes in a group. Okay? Then plus 3x plus 6 goes in a group. Now we want to factor this expression. And don't forget, we've got a 4x out here times all of this. Okay? So we're going to have 4x times, if we factor x squared and 2x, we can pull out x times, and then we'll have x plus 2, put our plus sign, and then the greatest common factor of 3x and 6 is 3, and if we factor that out, it's x plus 2. Okay? So now all of my factors, okay, so now 4x is one of my factors, times, again, the numbers on the outside are one of my factors, or the terms on the outside. So x plus 3 is one of my factors. And then I've got a third factor now, x plus 2. And we only had to write one of these down because they're the same factor. So this is now completely factored. Okay, 4x times x plus 3 times x plus 2. So now I need to set all three of those equal to 0 to solve the original equation. Okay, so 4x equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. Well, if I solve this one, I'm going to get 0. If I solve this one, I'm going to get x equals negative 3. If I solve this one, I'm going to get x equals negative 2. So now I've got three solutions. I need to write all three of them down. So x equals, and you know I like them in order from least to greatest, negative 3, negative 2, and 0. So there are three solutions to this one. And if we look at our original, notice this cubed here. A lot of times when we have an x cubed, that's going to mean we have three solutions. Okay? So there's that example. Let's go ahead and keep on moving on. Okay, here's another example we're going to solve by factoring. And again, first thing we need to do is pull out the greatest common factor here. So the greatest common factor of 45 and 20, well, that's going to be 5. And the greatest common factor of x to the fourth and x to the second is x to the second. And 5 times 9 is 45, and x squared times x squared gives me x to the fourth. And 5 times 4 is 20. Okay, so now we gotta see if we can factor this one or not. The very first thing that we should do is go ahead and write it in standard form. Okay, so we're gonna have 5x squared times 9x squared plus 0x plus negative 4. Okay, well, there's no greatest common factor of any of these, so we gotta do a times c, and a times c is negative 36. Now I want to know what are factors of negative 36 that add up to 0. Well, that's going to be 6 and negative 6. Okay, so again we got this 5x squared over here. I'm going to go ahead and use the grouping method on this one. So we're going to have 9x squared plus 6x plus negative 6x plus negative 4. Okay, so again, grouping method, that's where we're going to group this one and this one. Greatest common factor 9x squared and 6x, well that's 3x. and 3x times 3x gives me 9x squared, plus 3x times 2 gives me 6x. Okay, plus greatest common factor of negative 6x and negative 4 is negative 2. And that gives me 3x plus, and negative 2 times 2 gives me negative 4. So again, we've got the same factor here. So now my three factors, okay, are going to be 5x times, and then I've got 3x plus negative 2 times 3x plus 2. Now we had to set each, whoops, sorry, this would be 5x squared, my fault, make sure we write that down, that's very important. Okay, now we have to set each one of those equal to 0, so we're going to say 5x squared equals 0, 3x plus negative 2 equals 0, and 3x plus 2 equals 0. Okay? Well, we solve this one, we're going to divide by 5. We're going to get x squared equals 0. So we're going to get x equals 0 for one of the solutions. This one we add 2. And then divide by 3. We're going to get x equals 2/3. Now this one we're going to take away 2. And then divide by 3. So we get x equals negative 2/3. Okay? So we've got three solutions here. Okay? The reason for that is because if we look up at the top, remember how the last one was x cubed and we said normally that means there's three solutions? Well, x to the fourth will normally mean there's four solutions. Okay? So let's look at what happened here and why we didn't get four solutions. We got one for this factor and one for this factor. Now this one, okay, really could have had two factors. If this would have been anything other than 0, if it would have been 4, then we would have had like 2 and negative 2. And then we would have had two answers to that. Okay, so then there would have been 4 total. But because this equaled out to 0, we only end up with 3. So our answers are x equals negative 2/3, 0, and positive 2/3. Okay? We got two more slides.